Welcome to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Davis. The podcast returns to Mondays, and WWE returns from Saudi Arabia this week with a little less respect on the island of relevancy. I explain the ramifications of the Crown Jewel event from this past weekend. Plus, AEW provides fans a clear direction of its company moving forward, with returns happening and still looming in the coming weeks. This and so much more on today's Mic Drop Monday. Stay tuned. What's up, everybody? It's your host, Michael Davis, for the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, getting more content out on social media as the weeks go on. We're also closing in on our 1-year anniversary of the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. I believe that's next week, so we got to do something special for that. But let's not waste any time in getting into the Crown Jewel pay-per-view event. The buzz around the wrestling world has been Roman Reigns versus Logan Paul for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. There was no question whether or not Roman Reigns was going to win. It was a matter of what. And looking at this match, if you remember from podcast last week, I was like, this needs to be a squash. This needs to be a Brock Lesnar taking John Cena Suplex City kind of thing. And it wasn't. Instead, it was a 25-minute match. Apparently, Logan Paul tore his ACL, MCL, meniscus midway through the match. I'm not quite sure how that works. But that was a match that lasted about 20 minutes too long. And it wasn't because of the match itself. I thought the match quality was better than expected. I feel like Logan Paul, in his 3 matches this year at WrestleMania, at SummerSlam, at Crown Jewel, have actually been entertaining enough to keep a fan's attention and actually earn the respect of the IWC, to where Logan Paul's obviously put in the work to be a WWE superstar when he is in the ring. The reason I feel like this match went 20 minutes too long is Roman Reigns is currently the undisputed WWE Universal Champion. If you look at who all he has defeated, you talk about Bobby Lashley, you talk about Brock Lesnar, you talk about Daniel Bryan, Edge, Bray Wyatt, Braun Strowman, Jey Uso, and the list goes on and on and on. And the list is too long to count because we're 2 years into this thing. And so you are building Roman Reigns up over these last 2 years as not only the greatest superstar right now, but you are building up to be the greatest superstar of all time, looming a match with the great one, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, at WrestleMania. When WrestleMania goes Hollywood this spring, that's what you're building up to. For Roman Reigns to wrestle Logan Paul have his 3rd match and take the tribal chief to the limit, it kind of doesn't go along with the story per se. I was like, okay, we'll give Logan Paul a false finish or 2 at the beginning with the one lucky punch. And then Roman Reigns shows why he has been at the top of this profession for 2 years. Now, with Logan Paul taking Roman Reigns 25 minutes, we didn't even see Brock Lesnar take those matches as long as he did. And we saw Lesnar face Reigns at WrestleMania and SummerSlam. WrestleMania, the greatest match of WrestleMania history. That's what it was billed as, unifying the world titles. And that match didn't last as long as this Crown Jewel match between Roman Reigns and Logan Paul. I mean, give credit where credit's due. This was a good match. I feel like the Island of Relevancy is kind of tarnished. It could destroy Roman Reigns' aura and around his world title match and around his world title reign. But kudos to Logan Paul for just not being a celebrity who takes this for granted. He actually, wrestled. Speaking of, looking at a little bit of the other card, you had Brock Lesnar defeat Bobby Lashley in the opening match. That match pretty much happened exactly how we thought it would, except I didn't expect Lesnar to take the pin and get the victory over Bobby Lashley. And this kind of feels like they're not done. Lashley is 2-1 over Brock Lesnar. And after Lesnar won, it didn't seem like Lashley was settled at all. I believe they're going right back in the future. And Bobby Lashley's actually made comments recently about the Hurt Business returning. I could see this being the perfect opportunity to introduce Cedric Alexander, introduce Shelton Benjamin, and even find a way to have Omos in the Hurt Business. He's aligned with MVP right now. It kind of writes itself to give the Hurt Business an added layer. And Omos actually wrestled Braun Strowman this past weekend at Crown Jewel. It's not as bad as I thought it'd be. Maybe my bar was low, so I wasn't disappointed with what the match could be. But it's pretty obvious that Omos and Strowman should part ways with this. While they have that one match under their belt, Omos be the monster of Monday Night Raw, Braun Strowman be the monster of Friday Night SmackDown, and go their separate ways. It's a big win for Braun Strowman. It had a Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant-esque feel, according to Braun Strowman. I think that might be a little out of pocket. I know this isn't Out of Pocket with Michael Davis that you can catch on Friday afternoons at 5 on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, WWBG 1470 AM. Nice little plug right there, right? By yours truly. But it felt like that. It needs to be a one and done kind of a match at Crown Jewel, had that spectacle around it. And some of the matches I was really impressed by was the OC versus Judgment Day. When I went to Raw a few weeks ago, the most entertained I was from the OC and Judgment Day in the first 30 minutes between that promo, them building up Dominic Mysterio like a star. That is prime time what Triple H is good at doing. And WWE's done this for decades. You look at the Nation of Domination. What star arose from there? The Rock. You had established stars like Farouk trying to push him on. You had the Brood. Who'd that push over? Edge. You had D-Generation X really putting Triple H into his main event stardom. Like, it catapulted Triple H, especially when Shawn Michaels took some time off. And the question is, where did they go here from Judgment Day's victory? I feel like you can still keep this going. We have Survivor Series War Games later on this month. I feel like you can do something there with Judgment Day, OC, and with Rhea. Rhea Ripley designed her hair just like the Glamazon Beth Phoenix. And in that case, you could really have Rhea Ripley versus Beth Phoenix. I feel like you could do that at Survivor Series. I don't want this being pushed on till the Royal Rumble, but if you can do this match at Survivor Series, that would be ideal. So OC Judgment Day, I feel like they'll continue to compete on. And one match that kind of reminded me of the Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression, kind of in a PG version, was Drew McIntyre versus Karrion Kross in a steel cage. And I'm looking, and I feel like Hell in a Cell has taken the place of the steel cage in a way of having these ruthless personal rivalries compete inside Hell in a Cell. That steel cage matches often get forgotten. So it kind of reminded me of guys like Triple H and The Rock fighting inside the steel cage when McIntyre and Kross squared off in Saudi Arabia inside the steel cage. And these are two guys. WWE wants to build superstars. And I feel like they come in all shapes and sizes. I feel like Ricochet's a superstar. But when you saw Drew McIntyre and Karrion Kross in that cage locked against each other, when you saw them a month ago in a strap match, it just comes across like those two could easily be in the main event wrestling for the world title, and anyone would pay money to watch it, and anyone would buy those two being the world champion of your wrestling company. You have Bianca Belair versus Bayley, and perhaps the match of the night. Okay? I believe it's a questionable ending, but in terms of the quality of the match, it went 20 minutes and just had a lot of these different spots, but didn't feel like too much of a spot monkey match. It felt like a personal feud for the championship. It was perfect. I questioned the ending, so I feel like they made Bayley look like she remained strong. Bayley was trapped inside a ladder underneath the turnbuckle, unique spot they haven't done before. And when you have a lot of these gimmick matches, you have a hard time trying to not duplicate an ending in the match. It's hard to get real creative. I feel like that was a real creative spot to make sure that Bayley kept some of her dignity. There's two questions that I have after that match. One, who does Bianca Belair face now? Do you run Bianca Belair and Bayley once again? Maybe have there be a War Games match at Survivor Series, have Bayley straight up face Bianca Belair at Survivor Series? Do you have somebody else challenge Bianca Belair? Nikki Cross, maybe? Is Nikki Cross a part of Damage Control after helping Io Sky and Dakota Kai win back the women's tag titles? And does this make Bayley look a little weak because she's the only one of Damage Control to not be champions? And so I felt like Crown Jewel was the perfect opportunity. You just took the titles off Io Sky and Dakota Kai to give Damage Control the titles. Give them the titles. Make it like the Hurt Business, where they had all the titles. Make it like the Bloodline, where they currently have all the titles. Make it like Evolution, where they had all the titles. This is a perfect way to build a dominant women's faction. You could bring in Toxic Attraction right after it once Mandy Rose, JC Jane, Gigi Jolin are done in NXT, and then you have a new rivalry that you could run 3, 4, or 5 months. And I'm not entirely a big fan of them playing hot potato with the women's tag titles. I believe this is the second or third title reign for Damage Control. You know, they did lose to Aaliyah and Raquel Rodriguez when they should have won, and then they immediately won back. And I think they held the titles until they lost to Alexa and Asuka, and now they just went back. I feel like they're playing hot potato with the women's tag titles too much. But one thing that really stood out was Alexa Bliss's connection with Bray Wyatt. They showed a Bray Wyatt 6 promo during Alexa's backstage interview with her teammate Asuka before they lost the titles. And then Bray Wyatt came out towards the end of the show and did another promo. That was a little disappointing. There wasn't anything that couldn't have been shown on SmackDown. I know they wanted to get Bray Wyatt on Crown Jewel, but it feels like they're kind of delaying whatever they're leading to. You know, usually it would build one thing on top of another, on top of another. But now it feels like there was a report a few weeks ago that WWE isn't entirely sold on what to do with Bray Wyatt and the direction of his character. But we'll see what happens there. And that was a heck of a weekend. There's a lot to talk about. There's things I like, there's things I didn't like. But at the end of the day, it's Saudi Arabia. And in terms of a Saudi Arabia show, I'm not going to complain. But when we come back, we're going to talk about how AEW is moving forward with some returns, some not returning, and what it looks like for the brand coming up when we come back after the break. Welcome back to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, Michael Davis. And after just talking about a stat Crown Jewel event, we turned gears over to the other wrestling company, All Elite Wrestling Dynamite. Now, if you've noticed, it may not be All Elite Wrestling. It might be missing some people. It might be missing the Elite. Obviously, the company named after King Omega, the Young Bucks, who helped found AEW at its initiation in 2019. And we've had vignettes over the last few weeks about the Elite coming back. And there's questions of, what does this look like? What does it look like for the Elite to come back? And after seeing these videos, it looks like they're going to play on Tony Khan suspending them, AEW running shows without them for a couple months. And I feel like they're going to take this to heart, just like you would in your job. If you were to do something and you feel you're wrongfully accused or whatever, waiting for an investigation to fall through, and your employer suspends you, when you come back, there may be some hesitation right there. There may be something like, you know what, I've done everything for this company, and it was kind of hurtful that we got suspended. We didn't do anything. I feel like they're going to take that spin with it when it comes to the Elite returning. There's a rumor they may go back after the World Trios titles. That's a possibility. They did get stripped of them after they were the inaugural Trios champions. Perfect timing, right, to have that media scrum come to play. But that media scrum, there's been a lot of questions. It's changed. It changed the entire trajectory of AEW. You had the Elite as World Trios champions. Who knows how long that reign lasts, who they put over when they eventually win. And you had CM Punk, who was your AEW World Champion, and Jon Moxley was about to take a 6-week vacation after losing to Punk in his hometown of Chicago. And then all of a sudden they are like, hey, John, we need you. Can you cancel your vacation? We'll put the title back on you. And this is probably how the conversation went down. We need you to drop it to MJF at Full Gear. And Mox is like, well, dang, I guess I'm canceling my vacation and my company needs me. And Mox, stand up guy for doing that. And who knows, like, this could have led to CM Punk losing the title to MJF at Full Gear. Like, there's so much that has changed, and AEW's finally getting back on track. But if there's one thing that we learned Wednesday night on Dynamite, and we talked about this a little, if you listen to my radio show, Out of Pocket, Jason Cetek joined me for the final segment. It was wrestling. And Dynamite last week, if there was one message that was sent out, CM Punk is not returning to AEW Dynamite. This is not a this is not an easy ploy. This is not this, that, whatever. You know why? Because in perhaps the most underwhelming reveal in AEW history, in my eyes, I know the Philly crowd popped for it, and I despise that they did. I despise Philly in general. For Colt Cabana to come out as Chris Jericho's mystery opponent, it just was a big metaphorical middle finger to CM Punk saying, we're not having you back. After CM Punk fought the Elite backstage, after CM Punk talked trash about Colt Cabana in a rant that didn't even have anything to do with the main event match he had with Jon Moxley, it was a big metaphorical middle finger to have Colt Cabana air on AEW Dynamite and challenge Chris Jericho unsuccessfully for the ROH World Championship. We'll talk about how disappointed I was in that earlier. But, we can't forget about this disappointing debut reveal. It's Jeff Jarrett's debut. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say Jeff Jarrett, I'm a fan of. And personally, why I'm a fan of him is when I was, this was 2005, so I was on the verge of 7 years old. I have a picture somewhere in my parents' house of, it was like one of those like digital, you got to print them out kind of photos with me and Jeff Jarrett when he was NWA World Champion and me holding the 10 pounds of gold. That is a memory I will have forever. He's a great guy to me. He's a good heel, but I'm struggling to find a reason to get behind him being in AEW. I feel like it'd been a great way for him to go to WWE. I feel like it'd been a great idea for him to go to Impact. He just left WWE, but he's been on this like weird, just wrestling Ric Flair's last match, but comes back to be the special guest referee for SummerSlam. You have this like iffy kind of place, but I don't understand Jeff Jarrett coming back. I guess is the mic piece of Jay Lethal, Sanjay Dutt, and Satnam Singh. But I feel like Jay Lethal and Sanjay Dutt are not just as good, but they're doing just fine on the mic. And can we just say why Cole Carter? That could have been the most underwhelming thing that happened on AEW in years. As soon as, Sting's attacking Darby Allin and he removes the mask and nobody knows who it is. Nobody knows who it is. It's Cole Carter. Cool. Like, wrestling fans should care about that. We really don't. It was just a really underwhelming reveal. And then you followed up with Jeff Jarrett. And I feel like my disappointment has also set in of the reports of something big is happening on Dynamite. And I can't pinpoint what that was. They said something big's happening on Dynamite where everyone's going to be talking, where the whole internet's going to be buzzing. And I'm like, was it Jeff Jarrett? Was it Shibata? Shibata returning was great. Don't get me wrong. But it's not, it's something a niche audience would get behind. Like people who know his work in Japan. My dad was like, it doesn't really do anything for me. Was it Colt Cabana? Like, just very underwhelming stuff for where my expectations with AEW and their debuts have been at a whole other level. But one return I did not expect. Malachi Black, Buddy Matthews, Brody King, Julia Hart, the House of Black aired a vignette on Dynamite on Wednesday, and it looks like they are returning. I remember going on this podcast a couple months ago when all the news were coming out about some AEW talent wanting to be let go, and then Malachi Black asking for time off, Buddy Matthews asking for time off, Malachi Black's conversations about his mental health being leaked, and I was like, there's no way he returns. I wouldn't. If leaks about my mental health were, let known to the public, there's no way I return to work for you as a boss or company. So I'm shocked in regards to the reports earlier this year about them wanting out their contract. But Malachi Black did go on record and insisted that he would be back in AEW. This wasn't a goodbye. It was just a see you later. And now he's coming back to AEW either with his will or against his will. And the trios division just elevated. You have Death Triangle, you have Best Friends, but you return the Elite, you return the House of Black, and you have two qualified challenging trios teams that could do amazing things for you. You have Jericho Appreciation Society that are still there. You have, I guess some sort of version of Lethal, Sanjay, Jeff Jarrett's group. We'll probably see Jeff Jarrett versus Sting in some sort of fashion. It could be Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett teaming up again, not facing Ric Flair this time, but probably facing Sting and Darby Allin. And if so, what a year for Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal getting to wrestle Ric Flair and Sting in the same year. That's all you need to know about their year. But AEW made it very clear this past week what their direction is moving forward as a company, who's on ship, who's not, and it doesn't look like we're seeing CM Punk back on Dynamite, back on AEW. And there's a real question of, will he even appear in wrestling again? There's reports that Triple H is interested. I don't think that's a great idea. I feel like WWE's locker room is doing tremendously well right now. I would not touch CM Punk. As much as I want to see CM Punk return and be who he is, I feel like he's tarnished his legacy, and now you can't have him on board. So it's really unfortunate how that ended, and it appears like we'll never see CM Punk again in a wrestling ring. But as sad as that is, it's not as sad as my thorn. In our next segment of the Rose, Thorn, and Bud, we'll talk about a little bit about what's happening this week before we let you get into Monday Night Raw here in a couple hours. But when we come back, we have your beloved segment of Rose, Thorn, and Bud. This after the break. Welcome back to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Davis. We are on YouTube. We are on Spotify. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. If you're checking the Instagram, you're seeing daily on this day, break out into Edge's Metalingus theme song, which was great, by the way. One of the best entrance theme music of all time is Edge. I just remember having my headphones in, walking to class, walking through the high winds of the high country in Boone, North Carolina, Appalachian State University, and having Edge's theme blast in my head. I'm like, okay, now I can tackle this class. Now I can tackle this essay, this project, whatever the case was. But it is time for your beloved segment, Rose, Thorn, and Bud. And my rose was Shibata. I feel like Shibata being at Dynamite wasn't the best way to say huge announcement that everyone will be talking about. But as a New Japan fan and knowing what Shibata has been through, and like him wrestling is a walking miracle. He is literally risking his life right now wrestling, and Japan doesn't really want to touch him as much as you would hope. But it does go to show, and I think Jason mentioned this point last week on Out of Pocket with Michael Davis on Tobacco Road Sports Radio and WWBG. This shows a lot of what Shibata feels about Orange Cassidy, to where Orange Cassidy's character is really good. When you were originally introduced to Orange Cassidy, you're like, this is a joke. And Chris Jericho mentioned this on his Talk is Jericho podcast. Orange Cassidy, his character is a joke. It's a mockery of wrestling. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. And then once you start realizing that he's over with the fans and he can put on an entertaining match and be a safe worker, well, it works perfect. And I believe it did work perfect on Rampage this past Friday. It was really the highlight of Rampage, which is exactly what that show needed. You needed something on Dynamite to hype Rampage enough for people to watch. And if anyone was familiar with Shibata's work in New Japan or that niche audience, that should draw the viewers. My thorn was Colt Cabana. If there's one wrestler I absolutely despise, and it's because of an interaction with him, is Colt Cabana. I was really excited to meet him one time, and it wasn't the best interaction with him. So not only that, but it was advertised constantly that Chris Jericho's opponent would be a former Ring of Honor World Champion. Guess what? Colt Cabana's never won the Ring of Honor World title. You had a chance to put Christopher Daniels. You had a chance to bring in Low Key. You had a chance to bring in several former Ring of Honor World Champions, and you failed to do so, and instead you bring in Colt Cabana. And it was obvious what it was. It wasn't that you wanted to use Colt Cabana or he'd get a good match or whatever. It was literally to be like, CM Punk, haha, you're the loser in this. And not only are we bringing back the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, we're bringing back Colt Cabana, who you ranted about in your media scrum. It just didn't sit well with any CM Punk fans. It didn't sit well with me as somebody who doesn't like Colt Cabana, and as a fan who was tricked into thinking they'd see a former Ring of Honor World Champion. My bud is I think it was this weekend that they announced a SmackDown World Cup. So, you know, the FIFA World Cup, we have a SmackDown World Cup where it's going to be international wrestlers competing against one another, and the winner is going to receive a title opportunity against Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship. I feel like this is a great idea. I feel like you could really push or engage a wrestler. I feel like Shinsuke Nakamura could be it. Looking ahead to what lies ahead for this week in wrestling, you have Shinsuke Nakamura versus Santos Escobar. This match was announced before the SmackDown World Cup was announced. I could totally see them making this part of the SmackDown World Cup tournament. Or if not, because I feel like Santos Escobar needs this win over Shinsuke Nakamura more than Nakamura needs this win. But I feel like Nakamura is the favorite to win the SmackDown World Cup. So what I'm expecting is Santos Escobar to win the match, it not be a part of the World Cup. And then once we reach the World Cup tournament finals, we get an Escobar and Nakamura rematch. Also on SmackDown, we have the Usos, who just beat the Brawling Brutes at Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia this past weekend. We have the Usos renewing their rivalry with the New Day. And the this is brilliant storytelling. Let me just tell you. The Usos are closing in on becoming the longest reigning WWE Tag Team Champions in history. Who holds that record right now? The New Day. The New Day had a great run back in 2015, 2016, and they earned that title reign. They really did with how over they got with the fans. It was just a great, great part of the show every week. I feel like they've lost that once they split the trio up. Once Big E returns, they need to get back to it and allow all three of them to work on their chemistry together. But the Usos and the New Day, now the New Day are trying to prevent the Usos from breaking their record. It's perfect timing. It's perfect timing. You're going to get the New Day versus the Usos on SmackDown Friday, probably the main event. And rightfully so, that's going to be a banger. And it's not going to involve Sheamus or the Brawling Brutes, but it's pretty obvious that the Usos are going to win. I don't see the Usos dropping the titles just to New Day for the reason of keeping the record alive. Roman Reigns is setting records. The Usos set records. It makes the Bloodline one of the most dominant factions already in WWE history. Switching gears back to Dynamite, we have a 8-man tag team match that I'm excited for the top tag teams in AEW right now. You have the Acclaimed, the champions, teaming with who I believe the best tag team in AEW and the entire world, FTR, who are holding multiple tag titles right now, face the Gun Boys, Austin and Colton, and then Swerve Strickland and Keith Lee. And Keith Lee is teeter-tottering on that face. He's about to turn on Swerve, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. It's going to happen after Swerve and Our Glory lose again to the Acclaimed. I don't know why they're running this match back, but give Swerve and Our Glory and the Acclaimed, have their trilogy. The Guns versus FTR, give the Guns a little bit of like, oh, these guys can actually wrestle. Give the Firm a little bit of praise. And then we got to go FTR Acclaimed. It needs to happen. And unfortunately, it probably won't happen until I feel like they're going to run back Acclaimed and Swerve in Our Glory at Full Gear, which is not the direction I'd go. I'd get FTR there because FTR Acclaim needs to be a pay-per-view match. I feel like it's going to have to come at the next pay-per-view. I don't see it being a Dynamite kind of match. So that's what we have to look forward to. And one match that's just going to be awesome. It should probably take up 25 minutes of the show. Is 2 out of 3 falls, Bryan Danielson, Sammy Guevara. We continue to see the Jericho Appreciation Society, the Blackpool Combat Club, butt heads. And the great thing with those is you have like 5, 6 wrestlers on each side, and you have so many match combinations that it works. It works with Danielson and Guevara in a 2 out of 3 falls match. And we still have a lot of Crown Jewel, recap, anything that happened. There's going to be the aftermath following on both Raw and SmackDown. So we got to stay tuned more for that. But that has been it for the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. Remember to follow us. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow our Instagram. Like our Facebook page. It's going to be a great stuff coming up in the several weeks. We're putting out more content on social media by the day. And until then, we're going to see you next week on another Mic Drop Monday. Everybody, have a great week.